Welcome to The Gift of the Struggle, a new podcast that focuses on the struggles of life and the gifts that we learn from those struggles. I'm here with my mother, Louise Green. She and I have been having a lot of amazing conversations lately after we both went through a racial reconciliation group. She grew up in Eufaula, Alabama, which is in the southeast corner of Alabama in a very small town, very typical Southern town with antebellum homes. A lot of delineation between Blacks and whites in the community, and a very traditional Southern upbringing. So we've been talking about the things that were ingrained in her history and the lessons that she's learned over the course of her life. So that being said, she was born and raised in Eufaula. She went to college, graduated from the University of Alabama, taught music in Pensacola with two of her best friends, met and married my father in 1969, right?
Mm-hmm.
And raised us in Pensacola. They went to law school in Tulsa, Oklahoma, moved back to Pensacola and raised 5 children. We now live in Spanish Fort, Alabama. And at the current times of life that we're living in, this topic comes up a lot. We see a lot where we live of racial disparity and struggle. And so we just wanted to talk about the lesson of overcoming and not creating a cancel culture that doesn't give people the chance to evolve. And I personally think you have to give every person a chance to overcome the things that we've all learned in our upbringings that have not been for the greater good. So, Mom, I know you're so excited. Why don't we start with the group that we joined? We joined a racial reconciliation group. It was half Black women, half white women, and had open conversations. There was curriculum that kind of guided our conversations. And through that, we had a lot of realizations about, I think, the experiences of each other in the group and the experiences of ourselves growing up in the South. So what did you think about that group? What was your takeaway from it?
I really liked the group. Everybody was very loving and welcoming, but the worst part for me was I had to go in and tell my story from how I had grown up, what I called prejudiced, and how I had evolved over the years. When I grew up in Eufaula, we definitely thought that the Black community was of a lower tier, that we had wonderful relationships with them. In our opinion, we had wonderful maids and wonderful nurses from when I was little that I still, love to this day. But the thing that I think was more during this group that we went to, I came home and still, after I told my story, I still said that I was prejudiced, not racist. And Elizabeth called me on that and said, Mom, you were racist. And to me, growing up, the people who were racist were those people who said the N-word, who cussed them out, who treated them.
They were outwardly racist.
Yes.
Right.
And we weren't. We loved them. I thought they were perfectly happy. We knew everybody in town, and but as time went on, as I grew up, we were given books that said that they were not as smart. Black people were not as smart as
scientifically.
We were. Yeah. That their brain was not as developed.
Mm-hmm.
And
they were less evolved. Is that what you were being taught?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so I didn't believe that at one point, because my nurse that I adored, named Hattie Pearl, was very intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew that I didn't think it was just Hattie Pearl that was intelligent. I knew that Black people could be intelligent. And so I didn't believe that.
Mm-hmm.
But still, the culture was to keep them down. I mean, as I grew up and went to college and went to started teaching, I realized that the worst that we did to them was we just kept them down in their place. They knew their place and we knew their place.
Mm-hmm. And what would happen if they tried to overstep their place? Was it a negative?
I didn't see people who tried to overstep their place.
Oh, that just didn't happen.
It didn't happen in Eufaula.
Yeah.
They were, several of my, I was the baby. And so I was the favorite of a lot of my nurses because as the baby is.
Mhm.
And I just loved them. Hattie Pearl used to go on trips to Panama City with us when we'd go to the beach so that she could babysit for us while they went, mom and daddy and the others that were with us went out. And they used to tease me because we would have cots and I would roll over into Hattie Pearl's bed. Didn't think anything of it because I loved her.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being teased about that. And I just thought, I was kind of proud that I had slept with Hattie Pearl. But one time Hattie Pearl took me home with her to, she lived way across town and we walked because you could walk most anywhere in Eufaula. And she had dirt floors. She had holes in the floors of the house. They didn't have running water. She had a little boy named Leon who was just precious. And even then, although I noticed the difference, I didn't get the full meaning of that.
Mm-hmm.
Did
it impact you when you saw it at all? I mean,
no,
you just thought that was normal.
I thought it was normal because we went on that side of town
Mm-hmm.
and I would see them and I didn't think much about it.
Yeah.
But later on, Hattie Pearl told me that they got government housing and they had brick houses. And she said, Leon bathed and bathed and bathed because they had warm water.
Yeah.
They would have to get water outside.
Out of a well with a pump.
Yeah. And I didn't realize, I just didn't take it in.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I thought, my word, this is so sad that Leon.
And about what year was that?
Oh gosh, I have no idea.
Well, I'm asking because I remember, so y'all had a black maid named Adele.
Yeah.
Who did all your cooking and cleaning that I remember.
Yeah.
I was born in 1971. So, one of the things I was talking with my son this morning about some of this, and he said, people don't realize how recent in history this really was, that they think we're so far past this and it's not. And I remember being born in 1971, I was probably 8 or 10 when Adele got running water and indoor plumbing. I remember that in my lifetime. And that's not history.
No. And here's another perspective of mine. We had a yard man named Alan, and I'm sure his parents were slaves, and he used to call me and my sisters little missus. And he treated us as if he, in my opinion, was a slave.
Yeah.
He wasn't. I mean, he
had that mentality.
But he had that mentality, and it was really sweet and kind. It was kind of like Uncle Remus, But I look back on that and think what his history must have been. And when integration started, I went through my entire school career with no black people, and from first grade through 12th.
Because you were segregated.
Because we were segregated. Yeah. And for somehow I came to know during this time that their books weren't as good as ours, their teachers weren't as good as ours, because they came from what they didn't have opportunities that we had as children to learn. And so it was just a very slow evolution to me. Of understanding. However, I got to Pensacola to teach. Well, number one, I went to Alabama. During that time, Alabama was integrating, and we had black girls coming through Rush, and we were told to be, everybody comes to all the parties at first, and we were told to be very nice to them, and then they just wouldn't ask them back, and then that would be it. So we were.
And were you for that, or did that bother you?
No, it didn't bother me a bit.
Yeah, that's just what you did.
That's just the way I grew up, and I still hadn't. I got some things, but I still had that mindset for a long time, because when I got to Pensacola, I was the music teacher, and I had an office in the teacher's lounge with the most wonderful Black lady who was the reading teacher. And when it came to, she always brought her lunch, but when it came to time for us to all go, like before the children came, we would go out to lunch on the days that we had to be there before school started. And I would always make myself scarce because I felt horrible that we couldn't ask her, but it would have been a big deal in Pensacola to have a Black and white person eating together, and we didn't do it.
And this was in the late 60s?
And I graduated from college in 67, so it was 67 and 68.
Okay.
And she was so gracious and so sweet, and she never acted like she even noticed, but I'm sure she did.
Of course she did. Yeah.
And then when I went off, and this is another thing, while I was teaching in Pensacola, we had a roommate who ended up, well, she wasn't a roommate. One of my roommate's friends was ended up marrying a Black man. And she had lived with my roommate at her senior year because her family had moved away, and she wanted to finish her senior year in Union Springs, is where she was from. And so she lived with them. But when she married the Black man, my roommate's dad never spoke to him again. And her mother did, but she snuck behind.
She had to sneak around.
She had to sneak around.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was awful that happened. How, not that she married the Black man, but that the daddy wouldn't talk to her. But also, then I married Jim, and he was in the Navy, and we got stationed in Virginia Beach. And there was a Black man. We had 2 squadrons on the Kennedy, the USS Kennedy. And one of them had a Black man in it. And even then, I told Jim, I said, if we had a party, I wouldn't have a party because I couldn't invite him. But
couldn't, why? Or
because
wouldn't?
I didn't think it was right.
Right.
I wouldn't.
You wouldn't invite him.
I wouldn't invite him. And so I was still in that mindset. And
I think that's the conversation that we got into that prompted this whole real understanding. Like, that was more than prejudice. That was the racist line of thinking, right?
Well, the whole thing, now that I think about it, was a racist line of thinking.
Right.
We were so sweet to them, and we always gave them stuff and took them presents, and but we wanted them down. We wanted them below us. And so that whole thing, now I realize it's totally different from back then. I just thought, well, we're prejudiced. But I didn't even call us prejudiced. I thought everybody else was prejudiced. They were prejudging because they didn't know. But here's
they were prejudging y'all, the South.
Yes, because they didn't know how ignorant Black people were. And they were ignorant, not stupid.
That's a softer word.
No, there's a difference between ignorance and stupid.
Right. But I'm wondering what at the time you understood that to mean.
No, I knew.
You knew what it meant?
I knew what it meant.
Okay.
But we wanted them to be ignorant.
Yeah.
And so it was a very slow. And when I married Jim, he wasn't, well, what I call prejudiced. I will now switch to racist. He wasn't racist at all.
Yeah.
But he grew up in a town, and this was my thinking. He grew up in a town where there were no Black people, none.
So you just thought he didn't know.
I just thought, I said, you went off to college and you met educated Black people.
Oh.
And we didn't have any. And we didn't.
And Eufaula, they lived literally across the tracks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
on the other side of town.
Most of them did. Sometimes it was integrated closer to our side. But that's how we were brought up. When integration started, I was a big George Wallace supporter. He came from my county, and my mother was a child welfare worker, and she knew Jack Wallace because she would have to take these children that she was tending to in charge of to court if they were called before court because they had done something. She would go and kind of represent them and help them. And George George's brother Jack Wallace was the circuit judge, and he was just really sweet and nice, and helped every way that he could.
Mhm.
And we thought they were a fine family, and they believed just like we did.
Mhm.
But during that time, this is quite amazing. I didn't see any of the horrible things that went on that George Wallace did. I didn't see the march in Selma. I don't know why I didn't see it. I think we were all in Eufaula. Most of us in Eufaula were protected from that, or
Mhm.
maybe not protected, but they didn't want us to see that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And we didn't see it. And I would go to movies that had, showed the truth. And I would say, that's not true.
Because you didn't see
I
it.
said, I grew up there, and that's not how it was.
So when you say they didn't want you to see it, or they protected or sheltered you from it, who was they?
All of our parents, I guess.
As a community, kind
Yeah.
of? Okay.
Yeah.
So none of your friends were really experiencing that,
No.
or you were just kind of living your little bubble and you
Yeah.
follow?
Now, other people in Eufaula may have,
Mhm.
because I have a friend who grew up in Eufaula, who the Freedom Riders came through Eufaula one night, and which I didn't know, of course. But he and another friend of mine went to talk to them, because they were very curious about their situation and wanted to hear their side of everything.
Mhm.
And he was told that he had to, by the mayor came to see his parents and told him that he had to go. They had to get him out of town because people were mad. Well, I didn't know all this, but his family didn't teach him what my family did.
They saw the light earlier.
They were
or more educated on the subject.
And I've asked him, I wonder how that was. And he said, my parents allowed me to make up my own mind.
Hmm. So this is a man that you are still friends with now.
Right.
And you discovered all this recently, relatively recent, as adults, older adults.
As older adults, yeah.
So do you think that was just something even he at that age y'all didn't talk about it amongst yourselves? So,
well, he was a couple of years younger than me.
Okay.
And so I wasn't thrown with him a lot.
Right.
He was a cousin of my best friend, and
Mhm.
we were in chorus together, and we knew each other, but we didn't talk about things like that.
And so socially in your high school and things, and I think it's important to remember that this is before 24-hour news cycles. This is before social media. So it sounds like my kids would probably think it's crazy that you didn't see or know any of that, but you had to seek news out a lot more intentionally during that time in history.
We had 5 o'clock news and 10 o'clock news.
Well, and we even had that for most of my life.
Yeah.
We didn't get cable till I was old. So you have to work harder to find the news. And if your parents want to protect you or shelter you or keep you of the same mind,
it was quite easy.
It was easy.
It was easy for them, and teachers felt the same way we did.
So it was everywhere. It was in every institution and every community thing that you did.
Yes. In fact, I voted for George Wallace for president the first time he ran, and I rode on his float in the inaugural parade.
And we're proud.
And was proud.
So talk a little bit about your parents, because I think that grandmama had a little different vision than granddaddy did, in terms of she was helping people as a social worker a lot more. So she probably had more compassion, would you say, than he did? Because
I think he had a lot of compassion. There was but he was very racist.
Yeah.
I never heard him use the N-word. Well, I take that back. Maybe he did. I can't put my finger on it, but I think maybe he did.
Yeah.
Because he felt very strongly about segregation, and Mama did too, very quietly. She was a very genteel lady, and she wouldn't have said anything like that, but she was very compassionate. But the reason I say Daddy was too is that our maid had Adele, that you knew, had land, and she had the house that you saw where she didn't have running water at first was this guy in Eufaula tried to take that land from her because she couldn't read. And Daddy was furious, and he went out there and he tended to it, and that man didn't get the land, but he would have if Adele didn't have somebody to go back for it. Daddy was quite he believed in justice, but that kind of thing he showed compassion in. Some other things he didn't. Like we had a maid named Flower Bell. I loved Flower Bell. And Flower Bell had 5 babies, wasn't married to the man, but I think they all had the same daddy. And he would hit her. And she would come to work with a swollen face, and Mama tried to talk to her about, you don't need to stay with this man. But anyway, she had her 5th baby, and she named the baby after me and Mama. She named her Dorothy Louise, and Dorothy was my mama, which was very sweet, very touching. But one time we had a chest of drawers that was on legs, and so you had to sweep and dust under it. And Flower Bell forgot to do it, and Daddy just let her have it. I was just mortified because I saw it. So he just was mean about it, and so I don't know why he would act that way, but he did. And that was very disturbing to me, because of course we all love Flower Bell, and I'm sure that was disturbing to Mama, and Mama never would have treated anybody like that.
But isn't there a story where he wouldn't give you the keys to the car?
Oh gosh.
Tell that story.
Yes. Okay, this was when all the Black people were marching, but our thought was, when the Freedom Riders came through, I think they may have marched through Eufaula, which we weren't allowed to go to, but they the attitude there was, well, our Black people didn't want to march, but these agitators came through. And so, just got them to march, but they really didn't want to, because everybody's happy here. That was the attitude. And so Daddy, during this time, said, Louise, I want to talk to you about driving. He said, if Black men were in the road and stopped your car, tried to stop your car, would you run over them? And I said, no, sir. And he said, well, then you can't have the keys, because, they could rape you. It would be horrible. And so for like 2 weeks, I didn't drive the car. And finally, I just thought, heck, I'll just tell him I would, and I'd get the car. But of course I wouldn't. But that's how.
That was his attitude.
That was his attitude.
Because he assumed that about Black men.
Exactly. Exactly.
So as you grew up and grew older, and I know it was a long, slower evolution, what have you come to know now about the way you were raised and what you believe now? Go ahead.
Okay. Well, first I want to say, the time that I totally changed over my whole opinion was when I had children.
And why? Why is that?
Because I wasn't going to raise them like I was raised. And slowly, I told Jim, I don't know how you married me with that kind of attitude. And he said, he just smiles and says, I knew you'd come around.
Yeah.
But by the time I had children, I just all of a sudden thought, I'm not raising my children that way.
And what do you mean when you say that way? Because there was evolution after that also. After having children, there's always been, because it never stops. So what had you realized at that point?
We were not allowed to watch. Well, there were no Black shows when I was growing up, but when y'all were little, he didn't want us to watch the Cosby Show, and when it'd be on TV, he would just be, couldn't believe that we'd let y'all watch it. And I wanted them to watch Roots, and they refused to watch it. Probably Daddy more than Mama. And so I just thought, and you had this little boy that was a friend of yours in school, Jason
Davis, played for Clemson.
And he was adorable, and he lived like not too far from us, and he'd come over and play. And I just didn't want y'all to see the difference, that there was a difference. Of course there's a difference, but I wanted you to treat everybody equally. Little Jim had a little boy who was, I don't know where he was from, but he was Asian, and he was adorable. And I don't think Daddy thought that was so great. As a matter of fact, after World War II is when I was born in 45. And when I got married, my sisters had married a German and an Italian. And when I married Jim Green, he was just thrilled.
White bread boy.
Yeah. I mean, so I didn't want to raise y'all that way. And I don't think I ever raised y'all that way. Do you?
No, I don't think so. I think there were probably remnants here or there of things that you would say, but it wasn't, I can't even think of one right now, but it was like you didn't realize it had a connotation. You know how sometimes you'll say something, you don't know the history of it.
Yeah.
It might have been something like that, but we always pointed out to all of each other. I have a good friend who used a Bible verse and she didn't know that it was used against the LGBTQ people. And I said, I really didn't think that of you. And she's like, I didn't know that's how that was used. She just was unaware. And once I told her, she was like, oh my gosh. And we had a whole conversation on Facebook about it. And she said, do you want me to take this post down? Because I'm happy to. I don't feel that way at all. She just didn't know.
Yeah.
I said, no, don't take it down, because it was a really good conversation where we were both respectful and she learned something that she didn't know. And so I think that's why these conversations are important. She did not mean that. And I said it nicely. I wasn't attacking her. But I think if we don't have the ability to say, do you know the history of that phrase? Or do you know the history of those words? Or do you know what it means for somebody to say certain things?
Yeah.
That's where we are as a country. And it's wrong. It's wrong that we cannot say,
you're right.
Let's learn better together and do better together.
Exactly. Which is why our group was so good. But I do think that, we just have to learn and grow together. And we have to try to make our feelings known. I know there's some people in my family that I've said, were you racist? And they say no. And they're just like me, because they don't realize that was racist and they're still racist.
Well, and they haven't dug deep.
Yeah.
And, that group that we both joined, I think was so good for us in terms of race. They parted ways a little bit on homophobia.
Yeah.
But I think we both were able to learn what it felt like more, because they were it was a very welcoming space and there was no judgment. And when you went and told your story, they were the kindest, most forgiving people. And I have found that people in marginalized groups, when you start to realize or understand what you may have participated in or believed, when you have that epiphany, they're so thankful for the growth that they're willing to look over the past.
Yes, I boohooed during that time of telling that, because it's very hard to say that about yourself and know that you actually believed that. But now I'm to the point that, you have to think how things make them feel. And one is the Confederate flag. Or, they're still trying to get the Confederate flag out of the state emblem, I think it is.
Yeah.
And you just think, why? If that hurts a whole race of people, or if it hurts anybody like in that way, take it out. I think that's what I was in the Children of Confederacy my whole life. We met once a month. We sang Dixie. We had to tell about our ancestor who was in the war. And, it was just ingrained in us how proud we were of that kind of thing. But now that I know how hurtful it is to so many people, I'm just sorry I didn't know it sooner. I've told my friend who did seem to get it a lot earlier, I said, I just don't know why it just went over my head. I just believed everything that I didn't see for myself,
Well, and I think part of it is access to information. I think you had to work harder to get information than we all do now. And some of it's misinformation, but we can look anything up at the touch of a finger.
Yeah.
And I think you have to go through different experiences. You were around people who look just like you all the time. And so it's hard to learn when you live in a bubble.
Right.
So, one of the things one of my friends used to say is, if your dinner table or your dinner party looks exactly like you, then you need to diversify your table. That's one thing everybody can do, is you can include people who are different from you in your social circles. And I think she's so right about that, because what I find is being familiar and learning somebody's story and learning somebody's history and being close to someone whose husband has been pulled over because they're Black, or has been treated a different way because they're Hispanic, or whatever those things are. When you care about that person, that's where the change begins. When it's off in the distance and it's over there,
Right.
it's much easier to ignore
That's exactly right.
and think you haven't participated in. And when it's somebody that you love, you feel it, you know, and I think that's where a lot of change comes in. But what did you get out of that group? What do you think was the biggest impact from being able to talk freely to women who had such a different experience from you?
I don't know what I got out of it besides the fact that, I mean, I got a lot out of it, but specifically, I just loved hearing exactly how they felt about everything. And I loved that we could say what we had done, and there was forgiveness and understanding. That's what I got out of it, probably.
Did you get out of it because of those things that you just mentioned? Did that propel you to want to have more of that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I was thinking while you're talking, I think shows like The Cosby Show and like Roots really were impactful, because those of us who did live in the bubble, we had never thought about those kind of things. And I think that was one thing that helps us grow. And I often watch TV and see all the wonderful, talented, intellectual Black people in the news and in every other field. And I think, I wonder what Daddy would have thought to hear these people that are smarter than him, you know? And I just feel like surely that would have made a difference
to him. Yeah. I mean, it would be interesting to know how far his evolution would have, because he died in his 60s. He was not old.
No.
But even Grandmama died in her 90s, and she had evolved a lot, but then she forgot.
Yeah, she had, but
she had a little dementia, forgot how far she had come.
Yeah.
But I do think, you know, without the willingness to educate yourself, without the willingness to have empathy and put yourself in other shoes, you know, because now we've had a Black president, we've had, you know, Black higher ups in the military and in the government as a whole, you start to realize even more, if you're raised to believe that they were scientifically inferior, biologically inferior, that it was not that, it was a lack of opportunity.
Well, I also think a lot of times people who maybe not white people who have not had opportunities, well, of course, they've had a lot more opportunities than Black people, but I mean, in their own personal circumstances, I think a lot of times those people like to keep the Black people down because they're better than somebody. I mean, I think that's a shame, a horrible thing that happens in our society, but I think that often happens.
Well, and I think that addition to that is that people sometimes do think life is like pie and there's not enough for everybody. There's a certain limited amount. And if this group of people comes up and gets the opportunity and better jobs and better education, then there's not enough for this other group of maybe some impoverished other groups, white, Hispanics, whatever. And I wish that we could get to more of that, as my friend Nancy likes to say, that abundance mindset, where there is enough for everybody, and the more you create, the more there is for others. But I think a lot of people are not there. So,
well, I want to say this. Your brother and my son, Jim, plays jazz, and he was in a group every Tuesday night in Pensacola for years. And we made some of the nicest, most intelligent, most wonderful Black friends there than I've ever had.
You know what, Mom, this is so important though. I know this is hard, but I think it's such a good conversation. And for me, since our talk is about the gift of the struggle, the gift of this struggle is that you can show to other people that there is hope for change and that there is the ability to learn and do better. Like Oprah says, when you know better, you do better. And if you don't do better when you know better, then that's when you're a bad person.
Yeah.
But when you learn better and you apply it to your life and you become an ally for whatever group it is, and you vote to support all people, and you participate in community events to support all people, that's the gift. That's the gift is in the learning, and the gift is in the evolution. And a lot of people my age write older generations off. We're just going to wait for them all to die because they're never going to learn or do better.
However, there's also the gift of having those friends.
Yeah. Yeah. That you would not have had in another lifetime. And, you know, you might not have had those Black people in your home in the Navy, but you have now.
Yep.
You know, my children have dated people that are Black, they've dated Hispanic, they've dated same sex. And there is not I was listening to a podcast, actually it was Glennon Doyle's podcast, and Abby Wambach said, you know, if you, back in the day, you were a hardcore gay if you came out to a grandparent. Like most of us just waited for him to die. But if you were a gay and you came out to a grandparent, you were like hardcore. Like
so
that was something to be admired.
Yeah.
And that is not something we have ever had to deal with in our family. When children have come out or they had dated people who are different from us, there has been zero fear in any of my kids that they would be rejected or judged or thought less of.
Yeah.
And they have known 100% that whoever it is that they bring home, as long as they treat them well and they're good together as humans,
right,
that they will be loved and accepted. And that has, I mean, we have a Christmas photo with all of us in it. And one child was dating a Black boy. Another child who's a boy was dating a boy. And we were like the rainbow poster children for inclusion. So I think that you have to look at that. What a gift that you went through all of that early enough that when my children come up and they have the lives that they've got, there is zero wonder for anybody in our family. We were the best family for anybody to come in with somebody different because nobody cared.
Yeah.
And that might not have been the case 30 years ago or 40 years ago or whenever it was, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that it is hard and you might feel regret or shame about those feelings. But I think that's another thing that's important about this conversation is it's institutional. It wasn't just individually you had these ideas. You were raised by parents to believe those things. The school reinforced all of those things. Your sorority reinforced all those things. The government to this day reinforces those things by not providing equal opportunity. Our church has reinforced those things. So when you live in a world that wants to keep people down, it's a hard thing to do to overcome that and evolve. And I think that you should feel like the most gifted person that, you know, you can live your life with your adult children and your adult grandchildren.
Yeah.
In love.
I'm very thankful that circumstances have allowed me to evolve. But I will tell you something funny, which you already know, but I'll tell everybody. I dreamed when I was engaged to Jim that he was Black. and of course, Daddy was mortified. I mean, he probably would have disowned me, but anyway. And I thought, I'm marrying him anyway. That was even
you
before.
loved him so much.
Yes,
you would even marry them. So you were coming along.
I was coming along.
Yeah. Well, I'm so happy that we had this conversation, and actually we're going to have more to come in different ways. So stay tuned because there's a lot more of this conversation. I want to dive a little more deeply into the specifics of exactly what you thought growing up. We have some letters that Mom wrote when she was little, and some things that are kind of telling for her early age. But this is the story of why I really have a hard time with cancel culture, because I think, you know, running for office has never been Mom's goal in life, but if she were to, she would probably be canceled for some of these beliefs that she no longer holds. And I think that, you know, it's very hard line to cross in knowing whether someone has evolved enough to to hold an office and be responsible for the masses. But I think it's worth a harder look than often what we do. Because if someone did something 30 years ago and they've had a stellar record since then I don't know that that's worth canceling all the growth. Otherwise, what incentive is there to grow? I feel like if we believe in activism and we believe in advocacy, then you have to believe in a person's ability to learn differently. And if we don't give them that opportunity, then we're wasting our time trying to make things better.
I'll have to say that Jim and I have raised 5 wonderfully open and loving and strong children who have the right values. And I'm so proud of them for that. Y'all.
Well, thank you. You know, and it's not without y'all as leading us, even as you were learning. You know,
Yeah, that's true.
we all learn together. So thank you for coming on my podcast.
Well, thank you.
That wasn't so bad, was it?
No. A little hard.
A little hard, but you got through it.
Yeah.
All right, tune in next time. We will have another gift of the struggle.